The smell hit me before I even turned off the engine. Peeling plaster, clogged drains that hadn't seen a cleaning crew in years. The kind of smell that seeps into your clothes and follows you home like a stray dog you can't shake. I sat in my burgundy sedan, a 2009 Honda Civic with 180,000 miles and a prayer, staring up at the brick tenement building that had been standing in the heart of Chicago's South Side for over 70 years. The building looked tired, exhausted really, like it had seen too much and was just waiting for permission to finally collapse. I knew the feeling. My name is Rosa Perez. I'm 32 years old, a widow, and a mother to the most beautiful 6-year-old boy in the world. And today, like every 5th of the month for the past 58 months, I was here to pay a debt. My hand brushed against the envelope in my jacket pocket. $200. Cash. Crisp bills I'd counted 3 times this morning while Miguel ate his cereal and asked me why Grandma and Grandpa never came to visit. $200 doesn't sound like much, does it? For some people, it's a nice dinner out, a new pair of shoes, a tank of gas and some change. For me, it was 1/6 of my monthly salary. It was Miguel's tutoring sessions, his basketball league fees, the name brand milk he liked instead of the store brand. It was the difference between a life and just surviving. But I'd made a promise, and Rosa Perez keeps her promises. 5 years ago, my husband Antonio borrowed $12,000 from his parents. They'd given him their entire retirement savings so he could travel to North Dakota and work the oil fields. Good money up there, he'd said. Enough to change our lives. 3 months later, a man in a cheap suit showed up at our door with an urn full of ashes and a story about a workplace accident. No body to bury. They'd had to cremate him on site, the man explained. Something about regulations. Something about it being easier this way. I fainted twice that day. At the funeral, while I was still numb with shock, my mother-in-law Margaret pointed her bony finger at me and said words I'll never forget. My son left to make money for your family. Now he's dead and we're left with nothing. The $12,000 we gave him is gone. You need to take responsibility. She wanted $200 a month for 5 years until the debt was paid. I should have questioned it. I should have asked for paperwork, for proof, for something. But I was drowning in grief, desperate to hold on to any connection to the man I'd loved, and terrified of losing my son's only remaining grandparents. So I agreed. 58 months later, here I was. 2 more payments, and it would finally be over. I locked the car and started walking toward the entrance. 5 floors, no elevator. I'd made this climb so many times I could do it with my eyes closed. Each floor had its own personality, its own sounds and smells that never changed. First floor, Mr. Patterson, the building superintendent, always had his radio blasting old Motown hits. Today it was, "Ain't No Mountain High Enough." The irony wasn't lost on me. Second floor, the sharp smell of burnt red beans drifting from the communal kitchen. Someone was having a rough cooking day. Third floor, the Hendersons, the young couple in 302, arguing again. This time it was about the electric bill. Their voices carried through the thin walls like they weren't walls at all. Fourth floor, silence. Mrs. Jenkins' apartment was quiet today. And then the 5th floor. The 5th floor was different. It always was. The moment I stepped onto that landing, the air changed. Thicker, heavier. The silence up here wasn't peaceful. It was suffocating. Like the building itself was holding its breath. I stopped to wipe the sweat from my forehead, my heart pounding from more than just the climb. There was something about this floor that had always unsettled me. Something I could never quite name. Apartment 504. The blue iron door that separated my world from theirs. I knocked 3 times. Sharp, clear, the way I always did. Knock, knock, knock. Silence. I knew they were home. Robert and Margaret Perez never went anywhere. My father-in-law claimed his arthritis was too severe, and my mother-in-law always complained of headaches and dizzy spells. They lived like ghosts in that 600-square-foot apartment, curtains drawn, door bolted, day and night. I knocked again, louder this time. "Mom? Dad? It's Rosa." Nearly a minute passed before I heard the shuffling of slippers inside. Then the sound of the deadbolt sliding back. A dry, cracking sound like old bones breaking. The door opened just a crack. The security chain stayed on. Margaret's face appeared in the gap. She was 62 but looked 20 years older. Her eyes, sunken and ringed with dark circles, peered at me with the kind of suspicion usually reserved for door-to-door salesmen and tax collectors. "Is that you?" Her voice was flat, emotionless. "Yes, Mom. Hi, I'm here with this month's payment." I tried to smile, but my face felt like it was made of stone. "Give it here," she said, not an ounce of warmth in her tone. I opened my purse and pulled out the envelope. I'd prepared it that morning, counted the bills one more time, and sealed it with a small piece of tape. I held it out with both hands through the narrow gap. Margaret's hand shot out, bony, crossed with blue veins, and snatched the envelope with the speed of a hawk catching a mouse. She didn't count it, didn't even look inside, just stuffed it directly into the pocket of her housecoat like she was hiding stolen goods. The gesture stung more than I expected. After almost 5 years, I was still a stranger to her, still just a debt collector in reverse. "Is Miguel doing okay?" she asked, her eyes darting past me to the stairwell, like she was checking if someone was coming. "He's doing great," I said, forcing brightness into my voice. "He keeps asking about his grandparents. You know, this weekend, if you'd like, I could bring him over to spend the day. I've almost finished paying the debt. I thought maybe we could start being a real family again." The moment the words left my mouth, Margaret's face soured like she'd bitten into a lemon. No. She waved her hand dismissively. "Your father-in-law's leg is acting up, and I have terrible headaches. A child in the house is too much noise. We're not up for it. Finish your payments. We'll call you when we're feeling better." The same excuse, every single time. In 5 years, Miguel had been inside that apartment maybe 4 times, and each visit ended after 15 minutes with some new reason why we had to leave. "Okay," I said quietly. "Maybe another time. Go on now. Standing in the draft like this, you'll catch cold and then it'll be worse." Before I could respond, she slammed the door shut. The deadbolt clicked into place with a finality that felt like a slap. I stood there, staring at the cold blue iron. No invitation to come in, no glass of water, no, "How are you doing, Rosa?" or "We miss Antonio too." Nothing. I pressed my ear against the door, straining to hear something, anything that sounded like a normal household. My father-in-law's voice, the television, a radio. But there was only silence. A deep, unnatural silence, like the apartment itself was a tomb swallowing every sound of life. A chill ran down my spine. I pulled up my jacket collar and turned to leave. The afternoon sun was a pale yellow as I walked across the courtyard, heading toward my car. The contrast with the 5th floor couldn't have been more stark. Down here, life was happening. Kids were playing basketball, shouting at the top of their lungs. A group of older women sat on the benches snapping green beans and gossiping the way they always did. I was reaching for my car keys when a wrinkled hand grabbed my wrist. "Rosa? That you, honey?" I spun around, startled. It was Miss Dot, Dorothy Wilson, the former president of the Tenants Association. She was 75 years old, with silver hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She was sitting on a stone bench, fanning herself with a piece of cardboard, watching me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. "Hi, Miss Dot. Yes, it's me. Just finished upstairs." She didn't respond to my pleasantry. Instead, she patted the spot next to her on the bench. "Sit down, child. I need to tell you something." Something in her voice made me obey without question. Miss Dot looked around the courtyard like she was making sure no one was listening. Then she leaned close to my ear and whispered, "Did you go up to pay those 2 again?" I nodded, surprised she knew about something so private. "Yes, today was payment day." She clicked her tongue and shook her head slowly. Her expression was a strange mix of pity and fear. "Poor thing, working yourself to the bone for people who don't deserve a dime of it." She gripped my arm tightly. "Listen to me good, Rosa. Next month, don't give them a single cent." I frowned. "Why would you say that? I only have 2 more payments. It's for the $12,000 Antonio borrowed before he passed." Miss Dot's eyes widened. She stared at me with an intensity that sent ice through my veins. "They say around here," she whispered, "that sometimes the dead aren't really dead." The world tilted. "What are you talking about?" My voice came out shaky. "My husband died 5 years ago. We have the death certificate. We even have his ashes." She held up her hand to stop me. "I'm not talking about ghosts, child. I'm talking about flesh and blood." She paused, making sure she had my complete attention. That apartment up there? It's quiet as a church during the day, but around 1, 2 in the morning, you hear things. Footsteps. Movement. She leaned even closer. One night I couldn't sleep, went out on my balcony to smoke a cigarette, and I saw him. Saw who? A man, walking up to the 5th floor. The way he moved, she shivered. It was familiar, Rosa, real familiar. That limp in his left leg, the way his shoulder dips a little when he walks. My heart stopped. Antonio had broken his left ankle in a motorcycle accident in 2018. He'd walked with a slight limp ever since, something most people wouldn't notice, but I had watched that walk for 10 years of marriage. And here's the strangest thing, Miss Dot continued. Every time you come to bring the money, that same night or the next night, that shadow appears. I couldn't breathe. You must be mistaken, I managed to say. Your eyes, it's dark at night. Miss Dot's gaze hardened. I'm old, honey, but I'm not blind or senile. I saw him. He was wearing a cap pulled down over his eyes and a mask on his face. If he was a thief, he'd be skulking around, trying doors. But this man? He took a key out of his pocket and opened the door to 504 like it was his own home. She let that sink in. The building manager just installed a security camera on the landing between the 4th and 5th floor, on account of some break-ins. She released my arm and went back to fanning herself. You find someone who can get you that footage, Rosa, and then you'll see what I saw. I stood up on shaking legs. Miss Dot, I don't know what to say. She looked at me with eyes that had seen too much in 75 years. You don't have to say anything, child, just look. And when you see the truth, she turned away. Well, then you'll know what to do. I don't remember driving to Miguel's school. Don't remember picking him up, making dinner, putting him to bed. The whole evening passed in a fog, Miss Dot's words echoing in my skull like a bell that wouldn't stop ringing. The dead sometimes aren't really dead. That limp, that shoulder. He opened the door like it was his own home. At midnight, I sat alone at my kitchen table with my budget notebook open in front of me. The line that read debt to in-laws, $12,000, was circled in red. 58 months of payments. Over $14,000 when you counted the holiday gifts and medicine money. If Antonio was alive, if he was alive, then I wasn't paying off a debt. I was being scammed by my own husband, and his parents were helping him. My hands were shaking as I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found a name. Kevin Miller, my 28-year-old cousin, an IT engineer, someone who knew how to find things that didn't want to be found. The phone rang twice before he picked up. Rosa, what's going on? It's late. Kevin, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I need a favor. A big one. Name it. I took a deep breath. I need you to get me the security camera footage from my in-laws' building. The stairwell between the 4th and 5th floor, the last 3 months, 5th or 6th of every month, between 1 and 3 a.m. There was a long pause. Rosa, what's going on? I closed my eyes. I think my dead husband might be alive, and I need to see it with my own eyes. Kevin called me back 2 days later. I got it, he said, his voice tense. But Rosa, I gotta tell you, what I saw. You need to come see this yourself. I can't explain it over the phone. We met at a coffee shop on a side street, the kind of place where nobody looked twice at 2 people huddled over a laptop. Kevin was already there when I arrived, a steaming cup untouched in front of him, his face pale. You look like you've seen a ghost, I said, sliding into the booth across from him. He didn't laugh. Maybe I have. He turned the laptop toward me. The screen showed a grainy black and white image. The security camera footage, time-stamped 1:45 a.m., the 6th of last month. The frame captured the stairwell landing on the 4th floor, looking up toward the 5th. Empty. Silent. Nothing but concrete walls and iron railings. Wait for it, Kevin said. At 1:45 and 20 seconds, a shadow appeared at the bottom of the frame. A man. He climbed the stairs slowly, his body half hidden by the poor camera angle. Baggy jacket, baseball cap pulled low, a mask covering the lower half of his face. Stop, I whispered. Slow it down. Kevin pressed a key. The video crawled forward frame by frame. The man took a step. Right foot first, solid and sure. Then the left foot followed, but not quite right. There was a drag to it. a hesitation, and when he put weight on that leg, his left shoulder dipped slightly, compensating for the weakness. I knew that walk. I had watched that walk cross our living room 1,000 times, had seen it in the grocery store parking lot, at Miguel's first birthday party, on our wedding day, when Antonio came down the aisle with that same slight limp from an old high school football injury that the motorcycle accident had made worse. My hand flew to my mouth. "Keep watching," Kevin said quietly. The man reached the top of the stairs. He stopped in front of apartment 504, my in-law's door, and stood there for a moment, looking around. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring of keys. He selected one without hesitation, inserted it into the lock, and turned it. Click. The door opened. He slipped inside and closed it behind him, smooth and quiet, like he'd done it 100 times before, like he was coming home. "Go back," I said, my voice cracking. "Show me the month before." Kevin pulled up another file. Same time, same pattern. The 6th of the month, 1:47 a.m., the same man, the same limp, the same easy way he unlocked the door. And the month before that? Same thing. 3 months of footage. 3 months of a dead man walking up those stairs in the middle of the night, letting himself into his parents' apartment like he'd never left. I stared at the frozen image on the screen. The man's back, half turned toward the camera, his hand on the doorknob. Even from behind, even with the cap and the mask, I knew. I knew the shape of those shoulders, the way he held his head, the curve of his spine. It was Antonio, my husband, the father of my child, the man I had mourned for 5 years. He was alive. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my bedroom with the laptop open, watching those 3 videos over and over until my eyes burned. Each time I noticed something new. The way he glanced over his shoulder before putting the key in the lock. The familiar bunch of his jacket across his back. The way his left hand hung slightly lower than his right. An old habit from carrying his heavy work bag. By 3 in the morning, I had moved past shock and into something colder, harder. I pulled out my budget notebook and started calculating. $200 a month for 58 months. $11,600. Holiday gifts, Christmas, Easter, their birthdays. At least another $1,500. Medicine money they'd asked for when Margaret claimed she needed expensive prescriptions. $800. Various emergencies over the years. $600. Total, over $14,000. $14,000 I had scraped together while working double shifts at the hospital. $14,000 that should have gone to Miguel's education, his future, his childhood. $14,000 I had handed over to people who had lied to my face every single month for 5 years. And the whole time Antonio had been, where? Living in that apartment? Hiding somewhere else, coming back only when he needed the money I provided? The rage that rose in my chest was unlike anything I'd ever felt. It wasn't hot, it was ice cold. The kind of anger that doesn't make you want to scream. The kind that makes you want to plan. I needed more evidence. The video showed someone with Antonio's build and walk, but his face was hidden. No court would convict on a limp and a silhouette. I needed proof that couldn't be denied. The next afternoon, I accidentally ran into Mrs. Patricia Jenkins outside the building. She lived on the 4th floor, right below my in-laws, and she had a reputation for knowing everyone's business. "Rosa, what a nice surprise," she beamed at me. "Coming to see the in-laws?" "Just passing through," I said casually. "Actually, Mrs. Jenkins, I was wondering, have they seemed okay to you lately, Robert and Margaret? I worry about them." Mrs. Jenkins' expression shifted. She leaned in like she was about to share a state secret. "Now that you mention it, honey, there's been some strange goings-on up there." "Strange how?" "Well, you know I'm right below them. These walls are paper thin. During the day, it's quiet as a tomb. But at night? Honey, I hear footsteps. Heavy ones, not the shuffling of old folks with bad knees. I'm talking about someone walking around like they own the place." My heart beat faster, but I kept my face neutral. "Maybe Robert's feeling better?" She snorted. "That man can barely make it to the bathroom without complaining. No, these footsteps are different. And sometimes I hear the toilet flush at 2, 3 in the morning. Every night like clockwork. Maybe they're just having trouble sleeping." "Maybe." She glanced around, then lowered her voice. "But here's the strangest part. You know how those two are always crying poverty, right? Always talking about how they have no money since your husband passed? I nodded, a bitter taste in my mouth. Well, I've seen your mother-in-law taking out the trash late at night. Big black bags. And once, just once, mind you, I peeked inside one she'd left by the dumpster. She shook her head. Pizza boxes, Rosa. Beer cans. Name brand stuff. Since when do two broke old people who live on Social Security eat delivery pizza and drink imported beer? I felt like the ground was shifting beneath my feet. Pizza was Antonio's favorite food, and imported beer, Dos Equis specifically, was the only kind he would drink. He'd been picky about it, always insisting on the glass bottles, not cans. That is strange, I managed to say. I asked Margaret about it once. You know what she told me? Mrs. Jenkins rolled her eyes. Said it was offerings for the deceased. Offerings! Who leaves pizza and beer as offerings for a dead person? Someone who isn't dead, I thought. Someone who's alive and hungry. That night, I made a decision. I needed to see inside that apartment. I went to a department store and bought an expensive foot massager, the kind marketed toward people with arthritis. It was pricey, but it gave me an excuse. I wrapped it in nice paper and drove to the building at 8 o'clock that evening. An unusual time to visit. I was counting on catching them off guard. I climbed the 5 flights of stairs, my heart pounding with each step. As I approached 504, I heard something that made me freeze. Voices. I pressed myself against the wall, straining to hear through the door. Eat, son. Eat while it's hot. That was Margaret's voice, unmistakable. Your wife just dropped off this month's money, so spend without worrying. And then a man's voice, deep, a little raspy, a voice I had heard say I love you 1,000 times. A voice I had heard in my dreams for 5 years. Relax, Ma. I've got it all under control. Once she finishes paying, I'll disappear for a while. That fool wife of mine believed everything. Hasn't missed a single month. The world went red. I wanted to kick down the door. I wanted to scream. I wanted to wrap my hands around his throat and ask him how he could do this to me. To Miguel. To our son who cried himself to sleep for months after learning his daddy was never coming home. But I forced myself to breathe, to think, to plan. I raised my fist and knocked. The voices stopped immediately. Dead silence. Who is it? Robert's voice, suspicious and gruff. Dad, it's Rosa. I brought you a present. A foot massager for your arthritis. A long pause. Whispered conversation I couldn't make out. Then shuffling footsteps, and the door opened a crack. Robert's face appeared, his body blocking the entrance completely. At this hour, daughter? Why didn't you call first? I got off work, passed by the store, and saw this machine. I thought it might help with your leg pain. I held up the wrapped box, trying to see past him into the apartment. No, leave it there. The house is a mess, not fit for company. I'm not a stranger, Dad. Besides, I wanted to come in and light a candle for Antonio. I've almost finished paying the debt. I feel like I should thank him somehow. Robert's face went pale, and then, from somewhere deep in the apartment, I heard a cough. Not Margaret's cough. I knew the sound of her smoker's hack. This was different, short, dry, a man's cough. Robert nearly jumped out of his skin. That's your mother, he said quickly. She's been sick, coughing all day. You should go now, you might catch something. He grabbed the box from my hands and slammed the door in my face. I stood in the hallway, trembling with rage and vindication. That wasn't Margaret's cough. That was Antonio. He was in there, right now, living in his parents' apartment while I worked myself to exhaustion to pay a debt he had invented. Eating pizza and drinking beer while Miguel wore shoes with holes because I couldn't afford new ones. I had been a fool. A trusting, grieving fool. But not anymore. I went home that night and called Kevin again. I need you to dig deeper, I said. Find out everything you can about my in-laws' finances, bank accounts, Social Security deposits, withdrawals, everything. Kevin was quiet for a moment. That's not exactly legal, Rosa. Can you do it or not? He sighed. I have a friend who works in financial services. He owes me a favor. Give me a couple days. 2 days later, he sent me an email with attachments that made my blood run cold. Robert and Margaret's combined Social Security checks totaled nearly $2,000 a month, more than enough for 2 elderly people living modestly in a rent-controlled apartment. But here was the thing. They hadn't withdrawn a single dollar from their bank account in over 3 years. The money just sat there, accumulating, tens of thousands of dollars, untouched. If they weren't using their Social Security and they weren't spending my payments on living expenses, then what were they living on? The answer was obvious: cash. Someone was giving them cash money that left no paper trail. Someone who didn't want to be traced. Antonio. He was working somewhere, making money somehow, and he was using it to support his parents while simultaneously squeezing $200 a month out of his widow. The cruelty of it took my breath away. They weren't poor. They weren't struggling. They were sitting on a small fortune while I counted pennies to buy my son new shoes. I saved the financial records to a secure folder and opened my browser. There was one more piece of the puzzle I needed. I logged into Facebook and searched for Antonio's old account. It was still there, preserved like a shrine, filled with condolence messages from 5 years ago. I scrolled through his friends list until I found the name I was looking for: Tommy Morrison, nickname Hawk, Antonio's best friend since high school, the man who had cried the hardest at the funeral, who had held my hand and promised to take care of me and Miguel, then disappeared without a trace. I clicked on his profile. His page was full of party photos, bars, clubs, motorcycle rides, living his best life while I scraped by. I scrolled through recent posts until one image stopped me cold. Tommy at a bar, raising a beer mug, grinning at the camera. On his left wrist was a watch, metal band, blue face. I zoomed in on the photo until the pixels blurred. A Seiko sports watch with a blue dial. I would know it anywhere. I had saved for 6 months to buy it for Antonio as a wedding anniversary gift. I'd had our initials engraved on the back, R and A, forever. And there, near the clasp, I could just make out a deep scratch in the metal band. A scratch Antonio got when he wiped out on his motorcycle in 2018. James Tate, the man who brought the urn, had told me Antonio lost all his belongings in the accident. His wallet, his phone, his watch. So why was Tommy Morrison wearing my dead husband's watch? There was only one explanation. Antonio had given it to him. Recently. Because Antonio was alive, and Tommy was helping him hide. I stared at that photo for a long time, my mind racing. Miss Dot had been right. The dead weren't really dead. But I needed more. I needed something undeniable, something that would hold up in court and prove beyond any doubt that Antonio Perez was alive and had been defrauding his own family for 5 years. There was only one thing that could provide that kind of proof: the urn. The urn that was supposed to contain my husband's ashes. The urn that sat in the family plot in Indiana, in the small town where the Perez family had been burying their dead for 3 generations. If Antonio was alive, what was in that urn? I picked up my phone and dialed my mother-in-law's number. "Hello?" Margaret's suspicious voice. "Mom, it's Rosa. I was thinking, this weekend I'd like to take Miguel to the family cemetery in Indiana, to put flowers on Antonio's grave. I finally finished paying the debt, and I want to go give thanks." A pause. "That's a very long drive. Why bother?" "I had a dream about Antonio last night," I lied smoothly. "He asked me to visit. I'm worried, Mom. You know how I am about signs." Another pause. Longer this time. I could almost hear her thinking. "Fine," she said finally. "Go if you want, but make it quick." "Thank you, Mom. We'll leave Saturday morning." I hung up and looked out the window at the Chicago skyline glittering in the darkness. This weekend I would drive to Indiana. I would open that urn. And I would finally know the truth. And if that truth was what I suspected, then Antonio Perez would learn that his fool wife wasn't so foolish after all. Saturday morning broke clear and golden over the Midwest. I woke Miguel at 5, dressed him in his favorite blue sweater, and loaded him into the car with a bag of snacks and his tablet for the long drive. He was excited. He'd never been to Indiana before, never seen the small town where his father's family had lived for generations. "Are we going to see cows, Mama?" he asked as we merged onto the interstate, cornfields already stretching endlessly on both sides. "Probably, baby. Lots of cows." "And Daddy's grave? We're going to visit Daddy?" I gripped the steering wheel tighter. "Yes, sweetheart. We're going to visit Daddy." Miguel was quiet for a moment. Then, "Do you think Daddy can hear me when I talk to him? Miss Rodriguez at school says people in heaven can hear everything." My throat tightened. I think I think Daddy knows how much you love him. But does he care? I thought bitterly. Does he care that his son cries for him? That his son prays for him every night? Miguel fell asleep somewhere around Lafayette, his head lolling against the car seat, his little hands still clutching his tablet. I watched him in the rearview mirror, so peaceful, so innocent, and felt my resolve harden into steel. Whatever I found in that urn, I was doing this for him, for the childhood that had been stolen from him, for every birthday party his father missed by choice, not by death. The town of Millbrook, Indiana, was exactly as I remembered it. A cluster of old buildings, a single main street, and the kind of quiet that city people find either peaceful or unsettling. The Perez family had been here for 4 generations, and everyone knew everyone. Antonio's Uncle Richard met us at the edge of town in his pickup truck. He was a big man with kind eyes and weathered hands, a farmer who'd never left the land his grandfather had worked. "Rosa, Lord, it's been too long." He wrapped me in a bear hug that smelled like hay and coffee. "And this must be Miguel. Boy, you look just like your daddy at that age." Miguel beamed. "Really? I look like Daddy?" "Spitting image," Uncle Richard said, ruffling his hair. "Come on, let's get you both some lunch before you head to the cemetery." I wanted to refuse. Every minute felt precious, but I couldn't raise suspicion. So we sat in his farmhouse kitchen eating ham sandwiches while Richard told Miguel stories about Antonio as a child. How he used to chase chickens around the yard. How he once got his head stuck in the fence trying to pet a horse. Miguel laughed and laughed, his eyes bright with joy at finally having a connection to the father he barely remembered. I smiled and nodded in all the right places, but inside I was screaming. Was any of it real? I wondered. Was any part of the man I married actually good? After lunch, I told Richard that I wanted to take Miguel to the cemetery alone. "Just the 2 of us," I explained, "so we can have some private time with Antonio." Richard understood. Of course. Take all the time you need. I'll be here when you get back." The Millbrook Cemetery sat at the end of a dirt road, shaded by ancient oak trees whose branches reached toward each other like fingers trying to touch. It was a small cemetery, well-maintained, the graves marked by simple stones that had weathered decades of Midwestern winters. The Perez family plot was near the back, surrounded by a low iron fence. Antonio's niche was in the columbarium wall, a small glass-fronted compartment that held the urn containing what I had been told were his remains. His name was engraved on a black granite plaque. Antonio Miguel Perez, beloved son, husband, father. Lies, I thought. All lies. I set down the flowers I'd brought and helped Miguel arrange them in front of the plaque. "Daddy, it's Miguel," my son said, pressing his small hands together. "I came to see you. I got an A on my spelling test last week, and I made the basketball team. I'm the shortest one, but Coach says I'm the fastest." He paused. "I miss you, Daddy. I wish you could come home." I had to turn away. I couldn't let him see my tears, couldn't let him know that the father he was praying to might be sitting in a Chicago apartment right now, eating pizza and laughing about what a fool his wife was. "Miguel, honey," I said when I could trust my voice, "why don't you go play over there for a few minutes? I want to talk to Daddy alone." "Okay, Mama." He ran off toward a patch of grass where butterflies were dancing among the wildflowers. I watched until he was far enough away. Then I turned back to the niche. My hands were shaking as I reached into my purse. I'd hidden the tools at the bottom, wrapped in a scarf, a small hammer, a flathead screwdriver, and a micro camera that Kevin had lent me. The camera was already recording, pinned to my jacket lapel. The niche had a small glass door, locked with a simple key lock. Uncle Richard had given me a copy of that key 5 years ago, at the burial. "In case you ever want to clean it up," he'd said. He'd never imagined I'd use it for this. The key slid into the lock. Turn, click. The glass door swung open. The urn sat inside, a ceramic vessel the color of wet earth, with Antonio's name and dates etched into the surface. I'd seen it once before, at the memorial service, but I'd never touched it, never wanted to. Now I lifted it with both hands. It was lighter than I expected. I set it on the ground and examined the lid. It was sealed with silicone, a thick bead around the rim that would need to be pried loose. I glanced toward Miguel, still playing, still innocent. I worked the screwdriver under the edge of the silicone, prying gently, trying not to crack the ceramic. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Sweat dripped down my back despite the cool spring air. "What if I'm wrong?" a small voice whispered. "What if Miss Dot was mistaken? What if the man in the video was just someone who walked like Antonio?" But I knew I wasn't wrong. Every piece of evidence pointed to the same impossible truth. I just needed to see it with my own eyes. The silicone gave way with a soft pop, then another, and another. Finally, with one last push, the lid came free. I held my breath and looked inside. Empty. The urn was empty. No, not completely empty. At the bottom, there was a layer of gray dust and several small stones. Construction rubble. The kind of broken concrete you'd find at any building site. No ashes, no bone fragments, no trace of a human body. For 5 years, my son and I had prayed to a pile of rocks. I sat down hard on the grass, the urn clutched in my hands, staring at those stones like they might suddenly transform into something else. But they didn't. They were just rocks. Cold, meaningless rocks. I don't know how long I sat there. It could have been seconds. It could have been hours. Eventually, I remembered the camera. I lifted the urn, tilting it so the lens could capture the interior clearly. "Today is May 15th, 2024, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "My name is Rosa Perez. I am at the Millbrook Cemetery in Indiana, opening the urn that is supposed to contain the remains of my husband, Antonio Perez, who allegedly died in a workplace accident in North Dakota 5 years ago." I turned the urn toward the camera. As you can see, there are no human remains inside, only construction debris. This is proof that my husband's death was faked. I took several photos with my phone, capturing every angle. Then, carefully, I replaced the stones, resealed the lid with the strong adhesive I'd brought, and returned the urn to its niche. I closed the glass door and locked it. From the outside, everything looked exactly as it had before, but nothing would ever be the same. "Mama, are you okay?" Miguel's voice startled me. He was standing a few feet away, watching me with worried eyes. "I'm fine, baby." I forced a smile. "Just sad about Daddy." "Don't be sad, Mama." He walked over and hugged me, his small arms wrapping around my waist. "Daddy's in heaven. He's happy there. Miss Rodriguez says heaven is the best place ever." I held him tight, breathing in the scent of his hair, feeling his heartbeat against my chest. He's not in heaven, I thought. He's in Chicago, hiding like a coward while his son thinks he's dead. "Come on, sweetheart," I said. "Let's go back to Uncle Richard's house." We stayed for dinner. I couldn't refuse without seeming rude, but I barely tasted the food. My mind was racing, planning the next step. I had video evidence of someone with Antonio's walk entering his parents' apartment in the middle of the night. I had financial records showing his parents weren't using their Social Security money, suggesting someone else was supporting them with cash. I had photographic proof that Tommy Morrison was wearing Antonio's watch. And now I had video of an empty urn, proof that no one had ever been cremated. But I still didn't have the one thing I needed most: Antonio's face, his voice, an undeniable confession. For that, I would need to find him, and I knew exactly where to start looking. That night, after Miguel fell asleep in Uncle Richard's guest room, I sat on the porch with my laptop, connected to the farmhouse's slow Wi-Fi. I pulled up the screenshots I'd saved of Tommy Morrison's Facebook page and started studying them more carefully. Most of his photos were from bars and clubs in the Chicago area, but several recent posts showed him at what looked like an auto shop, a grimy-looking garage with a hand-painted sign that read, "Hawks Auto Repair." I searched for the business. It was located in Gary, Indiana, just across the state line from Chicago, in a run-down industrial district. That's where he works, I thought. That's Tommy's base of operations. I remembered what Kevin had told me about Tommy's background. He had a record for gambling and money laundering. The auto shop was probably a front for something else. Loan sharking, maybe. Or worse. The kind of business that operated in cash. The kind of business that could hide a man who didn't want to be found. I texted Kevin, "I need you to track Tommy Morrison's movements. GPS, phone records, whatever you can get. I need to know where he goes every night." The response came 10 minutes later. "That's definitely illegal. Can you do it?" A pause. Then, "Yeah, give me a couple days." 2 days later, Kevin sent me a detailed report. Tommy Morrison's daily pattern was predictable. During the day, he was at the auto shop. In the evenings, he went to bars and clubs, usually staying until midnight. But then, around 11 p.m., he always drove to the same location, an abandoned warehouse at the edge of the industrial park, about half a mile from his shop. He stayed there for about an hour each night. And according to Kevin's research, he always brought supplies with him, bags of food, cases of beer, changes of clothes. He's taking care of someone, Kevin wrote, someone who's hiding there. I stared at the satellite image of the warehouse, a crumbling structure surrounded by weeds and rusted chain-link fence. Antonio was there. I knew it in my bones, but I couldn't go to the police. Not yet. The evidence I had was circumstantial. A good lawyer could explain away the video, the empty urn, even the watch. What I needed was a confession, Antonio's own voice admitting what he'd done, and there was only one way to get that. I picked up my phone and called Kevin. "I need you to come with me," I said. "Tomorrow night, to that warehouse." Silence on the other end. Then, "Rosa, that's insane. Those people are dangerous. Tommy has connections to— I know what he has connections to, but I need to hear Antonio say it. I need to record him admitting what he did. Otherwise, it's just my word against his, and he'll disappear again. And what if something goes wrong? What if they catch us?" I thought about Miguel, about his innocent face, about the 5 years of lies. "Then at least I'll have tried," I said. "At least I'll know I did everything I could to get justice for my son." Kevin was quiet for a long moment. "Okay," he finally said. "Tomorrow night. But we do this smart. We bring recording equipment. We bring GPS trackers. And we have the local police on speed dial in case things go south." "Agreed. And Rosa?" "Yeah?" "If this works, if Antonio is really alive, what are you going to do?" I looked out the window at the night sky, stars scattered across the darkness like salt on black velvet. "I'm going to make him pay," I said. "Every single cent he stole from us, every tear my son cried, every sleepless night I worked to send money to people who were laughing at me behind my back." I took a deep breath. "I'm going to destroy him.